What came next was probably my favorite thing on the show. Drew McIntyre had this sit-down interview with Charlie Caruso. Now, there's been a report last week that Jerry Lawler said this, that they're not doing as many scripted promos on WWE shows anymore. Yeah. And there are some people, when they cut promos, you're like, that is a scripted promo. Like when Ricochet does it, it's like, well, that's a scripted promo. When Liv cuts hers, that is a scripted promo. But there are certain people like Drew, like Randy, like Kevin Owens, Asuka, who don't feel like they're doing scripted promos. And this here from Drew did not feel like a scripted promo. This wasn't someone wrote down, this is how you feel about this match. This was Drew telling me how he feels about this match and about this opportunity that he's been given. He talks about how when he debuted in 2009, he was supposed to be the chosen one. Vince McMahon had handpicked him to be the chosen one. But instead, he failed and he was part of 3MB, which was a joke act. And then he was fired. So he went to the Indies, he completely grafted, he reinvented himself and came back to NXT, won their championship, debuted on the main roster, and a couple of years later eliminated Brock Lesnar from the Royal Rumble and is now headlining WrestleMania. It was such a good story. It was an amazing promo from Drew. It was real, it was heartfelt, it was terrific.
Yeah, I loved this so much. Drew comes across, and I know you've said this on previous weeks, as so likable and so genuine with what he's saying. It's infectious, and by the end of the interview, I was smiling for his story. I was like, man, that's great. That's emotions. Yeah, I really liked as well in this that they didn't shy away from any of McIntyre's previous history of being the chosen one and 3MB and all that stuff and how it didn't work beforehand and how bad 3MB was because they were bad. I know I'm going to get heat for that because some people like them. Retroactively, I think, but still.
It's basically wrestling memes was the only person at the time who liked it.
But yeah, just to have that whole history of McIntyre actually laid out in an interview, instead of like, you know, the people who are more in the wrestling know have been watching for a long time. Maybe some newer viewers won't know this whole history of Drew.
We had a podcast emailer who said they only started watching in 2012, so they wouldn't have seen they would have only known him as the air guitar guy. They wouldn't have seen chosen one.
Yeah, exactly. So to have the whole history, or even before that, if anyone had only seen NXT Drew or main roster Drew or anything like that, to have the whole history of his arc in WWE laid out in an interview, complete with video clips and all that stuff. It wasn't just him talking the whole time. It was a really nice illustration of how far he's come, how much he's reinvented himself, and how much this WrestleMania main event was him working for it, which is a really easy babyface thing to get behind. This was a masterful interview. It was great.
I think it particularly, I mean, it probably helps because we are British, you know, and, you know, Drew is a fellow Brit, and his reinvention was on our shores. So I think I'm wondering if that is part of the reason why we're so much into Drew. But I also think it's because he's great.
Yeah. I think that's the main thing, is he's fantastic.
He's a terrific wrestler. He's a terrific promo. He has got a great look to him, and he's such a nice guy. Yeah. And it's been brilliant to actually have watched him come back to Britain, you know, a defeated man. He didn't make it out in the States, and then completely made it here, and was one of the real figureheads of, you know, the sort of reinvention of the British wrestling scene. That a lot of people have been doing amazing work in the sort of like the 10 years prior to that. I just think he's a one-of-a-kind kind of guy, and I'm really, really chuffed for him. I cannot wait to see him win the WWE Championship at WrestleMania.
Yep, let's hope he does. Let's hope he does.
Also, if you are a fan of funny stories, I highly recommend going back into our podcast feed archives to the Royal Rumble review between Ollie and Adam Blumpier. Because Blumpier tells the story about when he and Pacitti found out that Drew had signed with NXT.
Yes, it's a great story.
Because he was still WCPW champion at the time. It's a very, very good story.
Amazing.